Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So my name's Katie and today I'm going to be talking about some beginner adult fantasy recommendations. So I'm a big lover of adult fantasy and I think it can be quite intimidating, like when you first start just trying to get into it. So I wanted to share some of my favourite books which I think either have good like crossover appeal between adult and YA, because I love both genres. Well, they're not quite genres, age ranges. I think they both have their kind of advantages and disadvantages. So yeah, I just wanted to share some kind of transitional books if you're looking to get into more of the like bigger, more epic kind of adult ones. So yeah, so let's just get started. So the first one I feel like is a classic recommendation for like any beginner fantasy, and that is Mistborn by Sanderson. So in this we're following Vin, who is kind of like an orphan on the streets, and she and she gets taken in by Kelsier, who is a Mistborn, and Mistborn are people who can ingest metals and get powers from them. So if you're a Mistborn you can ingest all the metals and get all the powers, but if you're a Misting then you can ingest one metal and get one power. So Mistings are like relatively common, but Mistborn are like super rare. So Vin discovers she's a Mistborn and then she gets in with like Kelsier and his crew, and they kind of team up to take down this Lord Ruler who's like the big bad. So yeah, so I think this is a really great place to start because like Sanderson's writing is so easy and digestible, and the characters are really easy to like root for, like Vin and Kelsier, they're so great. And it's quite a self-contained story as well, so you feel like you've achieved quite a lot, even though it's a relatively long book. It's like what, yeah, 650 pages. So yeah, but it's quite like quick to read. It's not like a really slow because some books take me forever to read, but this one you can like get through, like it doesn't drag or anything. So yeah, so I'd highly recommend that one. So then next is a bit of a newer release, and that is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. So I chose this one. I think this is well, if you're looking to get into like N.K. Jemisin's books, I actually think this is a really great place to start because it's very like accessible and of her books. And I think the way, so if you're not used to reading fantasy really, because this one's set in like New York, so it's kind of a bit familiar. The characters are kind of, you'd almost see those kind of characters in like non-fantasy as well, and the kind of fantastical elements kind of add to the story rather than they are the main like driving factor of the story. So yeah, I think this is a really great one if you're just kind of new to fantasy. And also the kind of, so some of her other books, like the 5th season, they have like second person narration, which is, I think it works really well for the story, but that can be quite intimidating, I think. So this one is just like fairly standard, like prose, like third person. And yeah, and the story is like really easy to follow, and there's quite a few characters, so you kind of, it would get you like used to that, but it's really easy to like follow each character, and each character has a very distinct voice, so you wouldn't get mixed up between the characters. So I don't think I ever gave you a summary. There's basically, it's set in New York and we're following these like 5 characters who are embodiments of the New York boroughs, and they're sort of teaming up to take down this like big bad. So yeah, so that's that one. So then next up we have Steel Crow Saga by Paul Kruger. So this one is just like such a fun ride, and it's really reminiscent of anime as well, which, so I think if you like that you'll definitely love this. And yeah, I think it's just a really great place to start for a beginner because it's a standalone, so you're not like getting too invested in the like in a massive, because I think like 10 book series or whatever can be really intimidating. But this one, yeah, it's just a standalone, so it's just like 500 pages and it's like easy to read, and the writing style is very like digestible as well. And yeah, the characters are just also like easy to root for. You're following kind of 4 different characters who are kind of teaming up together to like take down this evil. That's like the description of every fantasy book ever, but anyway. And yeah, you have a really cool magic system in these. You have these kind of like spirits who like people can summon, kind of like Pokemon. I think I saw on Paul Kruger's Twitter that he described it as like full metal Pokemist or something, which is such an accurate description. But yeah, it's so fun, and yeah, it's just a great time, so I'd highly recommend that one. So then next up we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. So this is actually the sequel, The Dragon Republic, but this I think is a great place if you're looking to get into like more kind of grimdark fantasy, because The Poppy War is like pretty dark. Like some terrible things happen in the second half. I think it's a really good series to kind of start with because although it deals with very like serious topics and it's quite like doom and gloom, the writing style is very like easily digestible, and also I think it follows quite a almost familiar trajectory. So like the first half of the Poppy War kind of in this almost magic school setting, which I think is obviously very widely known, and then the second half you're kind of getting into the more like war kind of based fantasy, and then this Dragon Republic's quite military based. But yeah, so I think, and this one as well, the Dragon Republic really expands the kind of world and all the kind of military strategy and everything. So I think that's quite good if you're looking for like a step up kind of. So I think the Poppy War is like level 1, and then the Dragon Republic's like level 2. So I think, yeah, and they're decently sized books, but I think they're actually quite fast to get through. Like I think I read the Poppy War in like a day or something. I was just really invested. The characters are quite entertaining as well. Well, Rin's just a little bit feral. But yeah, so they're really great. And obviously Katai, I love him. And yeah, so that's a great series. And then the next one is Michael J. Sullivan's books, so the Theft of Swords like trilogy, and also the Legends of the First Empire. So the first book in that one is called Age of Myth. So these are I think these are also really great places to start, especially if you're looking for like to get into fantasy audiobooks, because the audiobooks are yeah, so in Theft of, and I think the writing style is very easy to get into, and also there's no like graphic violence or sexualization. Don't know if that's a word, but yeah, so I think these kind of would suit any age really. Like you could definitely read these if you were younger, like 13, 14. So Theft of Swords, we're following Royce and Hadrian, who are like this team of kind of, they're like basically robbers and they get conned into stealing this sword, and then but while they're stealing it they get like framed for murder. And it just kind of follows their adventures from there, and yeah, it's just so fun and light-hearted, and I think the series progresses really nicely as well, so it kind of builds, and the first book's pretty simple to follow, and then the series kind of builds up from there. And then obviously Legends of the First Empire. So this is actually connected to the other series, but it's like set about 3,000 years beforehand. So you could start with either or. I think the author recommends starting with the like Theft of Swords, because that's what was published first. But I actually kind of would recommend starting with Legends, because I don't know, I feel like, so I kind of read them in like a crossover order, and I feel like some of the stuff that happened in the third Theft of Swords book, it made a lot more sense if you'd read the Legends books. So anyway, so yeah, so they're really great as well. They're kind of hard to describe. It's like this, it's quite a unique setting actually for fantasy. It's like almost kind of Viking or like Stone Agey. There's like clans of humans, and the Frey, who are like elves basically. So the humans are worried that the elves are coming to invade. And yeah, it's just kind of them trying to sort out what they're doing with themselves. Basically, the humans following some characters in this clan. And it just has the best one of the like female ensemble casts, especially in like the second two. They're just so good. And yeah, I love all the characters in that series. So that's a great place to start as well. So then next up we have Furies of Calderon by Jim Butcher. So this is the Codex Alera series. This is the first book. These are also, I would say, a great book to read on audio as well. And this is just it's like, I think it's like Ancient Rome meets Pokemon meets Game of Thrones, which is probably the best description you could give. And yeah, the magic system is just so cool, and it's like an Ancient Rome type setting. And I think, yeah, the writing style is like very easy to get into, and the characters are really easy to care about as well. The main character, Tavi, he's like one of my favourites. And yeah, just watching him grow throughout the series is so cute. So the first book, we're kind of, Tavi's like this little sheep herder, merrily living his life for his uncle. And he doesn't have powers, but like everyone else in this world does. So he kind of feels a bit down about that. But then there's this threatening army that are coming to invade the valley. But then he kind of sort of trying to deal with that while not having any powers, which it's like the first book, but then it expands into so much more. And yeah, it's just one of the coolest series. I would highly recommend this one, and I think it's like a perfect place to start for like if you're looking to get into more adult fantasy. It's a relatively long series. Well, there's 6 books and they're all about this length, like 500 or 600 pages, and so it's not like super long, because I wouldn't say 6 books was like super long for an adult series, but it's also like just long enough to like make you realise that you can read that many books in one series. And I don't think there's a weak book in this series. Like, every book is so good, and they all have kind of their own, like, each book has its own sort of almost unique setting. So like this book, we're in this like valley, and then the second book is like kind of a schooly setting, and then like one of the later books they like go to this other country and it's all like wintry, and yeah, so it's just a great series. And the next series is the Seven Realms series by Cinder Williams-Chimer. So this is actually a YA series, but I think it's a great kind of crossover. So if you were like a bit too intimidated by adult fantasy, but you wanted something that's kind of a good like transition book, I think this is great, because the scope of the world and the like politics and stuff, I think is quite reminiscent of adult fantasy. But yeah, so in this one we're following Han and Razor. So Han is like a street lord, and one day he discovers this magical amulet which used to belong to this demon king. So the first book's called The Demon King, and then the wizards like start trying to hunt him down for that. So that's kind of his storyline. And then Razor's like trying to navigate, so she's the princess and she's trying to like navigate the court politics, and it also follows them kind of meeting and everything. And yeah, there's just so many like great characters and storylines in this book. And yeah, the last book in the series, it just ties together everything so well. It's called The Crimson Crown. The second book as well is like a magic school setting, which is really great. And yeah, it just has so many kind of elements of like classic fantasy, like the princess and the like court politics, and also the like kind of setting like mountainous and magic, and yeah, it just has everything. So yeah, so that's a great series. So then the last book I'm going to mention is Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett, and its sequel Shorefall, which just came out. Came out recently. And this is such a great series. I think it's a really great place to start as well, because like the writing style is super like easy to get into, and the plot is like relatively complex, but it also follows quite a simple pattern. It's like these characters teaming up to go on this like heist, which is like some buzzwords. So yeah, and Sanchia, she's such a great main character. She's like this little sassy thief, and yeah, and you also have like who's like a grumpy inventor, and then Berenice, who's like the sweet inventor who's like good at everything. And yeah, and Gregor, who's like the kind of honourable soldier, and their group dynamic's just so great. And also you have Clef, who's like this talking key, who's great, and it really adds a lot of humour to the book. And yeah, I think a lot of these books kind of have quite an element of humour to them, which I think is just, it really helps you like get into the book. And yeah, and I think this book has really good plot payoff as well, which is one of the things I really like about adult fantasy, how like all the storylines kind of come together at the end, and like stuff that you thought was maybe insignificant at the beginning becomes a really big thing at the end, and it just all ties together so well. And yeah, so that's a really great series as well. So yeah, so I hope you enjoyed the recommendations. Do let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, or if you want to read any of these books, or any recommendations you have for kind of beginner fantasy, adult fantasy recommendations. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I hope you're all having a great day, and I will see you next time.